Michael Jackson biopic. The faces behind the legend. A 9-year-old boy just won $50 off his own director by landing a dance move on the first take. A grown man spent 2.5 hours in a makeup chair every single morning just to become someone else's father. And an actress who was supposed to play one of the most famous voices in music history never made it into the final cut at all. This is the story of the people who had to become the Jackson family, and what it cost each of them to do it. Before we get into who they are, ask yourself something. If you had 1 year to prepare to play the most scrutinized entertainer who ever lived, would you even take the job? Let's start with the man carrying the heaviest weight of all. The nephew who became his uncle. Casting the lead role in a Michael Jackson biopic was never going to be simple. Every choice invites comparison. Every gesture gets picked apart frame by frame. So when the studio settled on Jaffer Jackson, Michael's own nephew, a relatively unknown singer-songwriter with only a handful of released singles to his name, it was both an obvious idea and an enormous gamble. What most people did not know is that Jaffer sat on the secret for an entire year. Not just from fans, not just from the press, from his own extended family. Multiple people close to him have said that even his mother did not know what he was working on until the studio's official announcement went public. In early 2023, when she finally saw him on a monitor, fully in costume and makeup, she reportedly struggled at first to connect the person on screen with her own son, because the transformation felt that complete. It would be easy to assume nepotism handed him the role. Jaffer himself has pushed back on that idea, describing a process that involved multiple auditions and screen tests before director Antoine Fuqua was convinced he could deliver more than a physical resemblance. Looking like Michael Jackson is one thing. Carrying his rhythm, his posture, his instincts on a soundstage is another entirely. There is also a widely shared image circulating online showing Jaffer on set appearing to interact with what looks like a chimpanzee, meant to represent Michael's famous pet Bubbles. Co-stars have reportedly reacted to how convincing the moment looked. But here is the catch. Nobody has confirmed exactly where or when that photo was taken, or whether it was even from this production. Is it real behind-the-scenes footage or something else entirely? Drop your theory in the comments. We want to hear what you think. The father. 2.5 hours to become someone else. If Jaffer carried the emotional burden of the film, Colman Domingo carried the physical one. Fresh off an Oscar nomination, Domingo took on Joe Jackson, the family patriarch remembered as both the architect of his children's success and one of the most demanding, controversial father figures in music history. The transformation was not subtle. Every single day of filming began with roughly 2.5 hours in the makeup chair, layering prosthetics until Domingo was, in his own words to late-night audiences, essentially wrapped in a second skin before he ever said a line. That kind of process does not just change your appearance. It changes how your body feels, how you move, how tired you are before the cameras even start rolling. Domingo has spoken about deliberately avoiding caricature. Instead of leaning into the most exaggerated public image of Joe Jackson, he spent his prep time working through historical interviews and biographies, trying to understand posture, speech patterns, and, perhaps hardest of all, the private reasoning behind decisions that looked harsh from the outside. He has described wanting to find the person underneath the reputation rather than simply performing the reputation itself, working closely with Fuqua to hold both the discipline and the humanity in the same performance. The mother who never met her. Nia Long stepped into the role of Katherine Jackson, the family's emotional center, without ever meeting the real woman before filming began. That is worth sitting with for a moment. Playing someone who is still alive, whose story you are dramatizing, without the chance to sit across from her first. Long has described Katherine as a source of quiet strength, someone who held a household together through poverty and later through the overwhelming pressure of sudden fame. Much of her key material was shot inside a meticulously rebuilt replica of the Jackson family home in Gary, Indiana, down to details like the exact wear pattern on the carpet and the specific shade of the kitchen flooring. One scene that has drawn particular attention involves Katherine comforting a young, exhausted Michael after a demanding rehearsal, with almost no dialogue at all. Just a touch, a look, the kind of moment that lives or dies on an actor's restraint rather than their lines. Long has credited the costume team's period-accurate wardrobe with helping her physically settle into the character. Would you have taken this role without ever meeting the person you're portraying? That is the position Long was in for the entire shoot. The lawyer everyone mistook for Michael himself. Here is a detail that sounds almost too strange to be true. When Miles Teller's casting was announced, a number of people genuinely assumed he had been cast to play Michael Jackson. Not because of any resemblance, but purely because of the first-name coincidence between Miles and Michael. Teller has laughed about the mix-up publicly more than once. His actual role is John Branca, Michael's longtime attorney and later co-executor of his estate. A very different kind of character, built on negotiation and legal strategy rather than performance. To prepare, Teller met with the real Branca over a series of lunches, using the conversations to understand not just Michael's business dealings but the legal battles that shaped the later chapters of his life. Teller has also pointed out something interesting about his co-star. No other actor taking on this kind of role could ever share the literal genetic connection that Jaffer brings to playing his own uncle. And after the film performed well at the box office, Teller has hinted that a follow-up project is already being developed, saying he is looking forward to seeing that story continue. The 9-year-old LD who won a bet from his director. Now here is where the story becomes genuinely charming. Giuliano Cruvaldi, just 9 years old, was cast to play a young Michael during the Jackson 5 era, a role that demanded far more than simply memorizing lines. He had to convincingly recreate some of the most scrutinized dance moves in music history, performed by a child prodigy the whole world has watched on film for decades. Valdi has described the entire experience as surreal, admitting he never imagined being part of a movie on this scale. And on set, he actually won a $50 bet from director Antoine Fuqua after nailing a complicated dance sequence on his very first take. Not his 5th attempt, not his 10th, his first. What stuck with Valdi most, by his own account, was learning just how hard the real Michael worked even as a child, waking early, staying up late, endlessly refining his singing and dancing long before fame ever arrived. That discipline apparently rubbed off during Valdi's own demanding rehearsal schedule. And his ambitions do not stop here. He has said he is already training in martial arts, hoping one day to audition for a Marvel superhero role, specifically Spider-Man. If a 9-year-old can out-rehearse most adults, what does that tell you about what real preparation looks like? Something to think about the next time you put off practicing anything. The Motown executive who showed up to her own premiere, Laura Harrier, known for her breakout role in a major Spider-Man franchise film, took on Motown executive Suzanne de Passé, the woman credited with discovering the Jackson 5 and staying close to the family through their earliest television years. Harrier has spoken about feeling an enormous sense of responsibility playing someone whose real-life influence shaped an entire era of the music industry, particularly as one of the few prominent women holding executive power in that space at the time. She researched de Passé's career extensively, describing her as someone who preserved not just music history but the visual and cultural memory of the 1970s, which in turn helped the production's design team build historically accurate costumes. What makes this one different from most other roles on this list? The real Suzanne de Passé was reportedly present at the premiere and offered her own praise for how Harrier portrayed her. How often does the actual person you're playing show up to watch the finished result? The man who built the Jackson 5 empire, Larenz Tate, recognized for his work in gritty crime dramas and prestige television, plays Motown founder Berry Gordy, the man who did not just discover the Jackson 5 but shaped them into a global phenomenon. Tate has described approaching Gordy less as a music executive character and more as a mentor figure, someone who could spot raw ability and refine it into something extraordinary. In one of the film's key lines, Tate's Gordy insists there will only ever be one Michael Jackson. A moment delivered, by most accounts, with quiet authority rather than dramatic flourish. Tate has said that portraying Gordy required more than technical performance. It demanded genuine respect for his legacy, along with close attention to his particular speaking rhythm and negotiating style, all of which fed into the film's studio set sequences depicting how Gordy's ear for hits reshaped popular music. The role that never made the final cut. Not every actor who trained, transformed, and filmed for this production ended up on screen. Kat Graham, known to many from a long-running supernatural drama series, was originally cast as Diana Ross, a casting choice that generated significant excitement among fans of both Ross and the Jackson family story. Graham has described the process of stepping into Ross's signature feathered wigs and sequined wardrobe as surreal, and reportedly worked with a dialect coach to capture her distinctive speaking cadence. But due to legal considerations and broader restructuring of the film's timeline, her scenes did not make the theatrical release. To her credit, Graham handled the news with visible grace, addressing it publicly ahead of the premiere and framing the cut as a narrative decision rather than any reflection on her performance. The filmmakers, she noted, needed to keep the focus tightly on Michael's own journey rather than every relationship that touched his life. It raises an uncomfortable question worth sitting with. How many hours of work, transformation, and preparation exist somewhere in a hard drive, never to be seen by anyone outside the production? The producer who had only 2 days. If Graham's story is about a role lost, Kendrick Sampson's is about a role gained under extreme pressure. Sampson took on Quincy Jones, the producer widely credited with shaping Michael's solo sound. With only 2 days of preparation, after the actor originally cast in the role had to step away due to scheduling conflicts. In that compressed window, Sampson immersed himself in Jones's speaking patterns and studio presence as quickly as he could. He has pointed to one particular idea that stuck with him throughout filming. Jones's own described philosophy of leaving space in the room for something greater than technical skill during the creative process. Sampson has said he repeated that idea to himself like a mantra during every take, particularly in the recording studio scenes. 2 days. Most actors would consider that barely enough time to read the script twice, let alone become a cultural icon on camera. The siblings who carried the family story, beyond the headline roles, an entire ensemble of actors had to recreate the Jackson family dynamic across multiple time periods. Some siblings played by 2 different actors, representing younger and older versions of the same person. Jessica Sula took on LaToya Jackson, navigating the complicated mix of admiration and quiet resentment that can exist between siblings living in the same spotlight. She has said she drew on her own experience with sibling rivalry to make those tense family scenes feel authentic, including a pivotal moment where LaToya defends Michael during a harsh family confrontation. Jamal R. Henderson played the older Jermaine Jackson, capturing the push and pull between being Michael's musical partner and, later, someone who had to watch his brother's solo career eclipse the group they built together. Trey Horton took the older Marlon Jackson, often positioned as the family's peacemaker, while Ryan Hill portrayed the older Tito Jackson, the reserved guitarist who preferred to let his instrument speak for him rather than seeking attention. Each of these actors was paired with a younger counterpart, Nathaniel Logan McIntyre as young Jackie, Jalen Lyndon Hunter as young Marlon, and Judah Edwards as young Tito, creating visual through-lines meant to bridge decades within a single film. Edwards and Hill even shared a carefully choreographed transition scene, shot on matching sets under matching lighting, where a young Tito hands his guitar to his older self in what is meant to read as a seamless jump through time. Edwards has said he had to learn basic guitar chords just for that handoff to look convincing, spending weeks practicing before the cameras rolled. The supporting figures who grounded the era. A handful of smaller but memorable roles helped anchor the film's world in its specific historical moment. Liv Simone played Motown legend Gladys Knight, bringing her own musical background to a role that required capturing Knight's warm speaking voice and regal presence, which Simone has described as carrying herself like royalty on an invisible throne. Between takes, she reportedly performed an impromptu snippet of one of Knight's signature songs, a moment the director apparently considered keeping in the final cut as a behind-the-scenes flourish. Kevin Chernick took on television host Dick Clark, the man who gave the Jackson 5 their first major national television exposure. Chernick studied hours of archival broadcast footage to capture Clark's rapid delivery and signature camera gestures, filming his segment on a rebuilt period television set complete with a rotating dance floor and a live audience dressed for the era. Kalen Darrell Jones played Bill Bray, the security officer who evolved into one of Michael's most trusted protectors over the years, a role Jones approached with a quiet, almost paternal warmth rather than pure professional detachment, researching Bray's military background to inform his posture and presence on screen. The moments that didn't make it into any press release. What makes this cast's press tour genuinely memorable is not just the polish. It's the unscripted honesty. Teller fielding questions about being confused for Michael himself. Harrier connecting with the real person she portrayed at the premiere. Domingo describing what it actually costs, physically and emotionally, to sit still for 2.5 hours before you can even begin acting. So here is the real question worth leaving you with. Out of every actor on this list, who do you think faced the hardest transformation? The 9-year-old learning choreography from scratch, the nephew hiding a secret from his own mother for a year, or the actor who spent more hours in a makeup chair than most people spend at work in a single day? Tell us who you'd have cast differently, and which behind-the-scenes story surprised you the most. If this kind of deep dive into how a biopic actually gets built is something you want more of, stick around. There is a lot more of this story still to tell.